This week, KTM announced the 2023 update to their awesome all-rounder, the 890 Adventure. And this is a bike that I already thought was one of the best middleweight adventure bikes on the market, and yet potentially these updates could improve it still further and make it the bike to beat. So here we go with the 7 key things that you need to know about it. Now, the fundamentals have stayed pretty much the same for the new model year, including the engine. And in my book, that's definitely a good thing, as the 889cc parallel twin is one of its standout features. You see, it's roughly the same engine as you'll find in the 890 Duke, but with a more adventure-specific tune. And the result is something that's nice and meaty in the low to mid-range, yet it still spins up nice and freely to make 105 horsepower peak. So there's plenty of fun to be had on tarmac too. The sound, the feel, and the performance of this engine are all massive plus points for me, and so there's no need to mess with a winning formula. Now, the other thing that I really liked about the 890 Adventure when I reviewed it last year is the way it holds its weight so low, and that makes it super easy to ride, and it just doesn't feel intimidating or top heavy at all. A big factor here is that while it does get a super competitive fuel capacity at 20 litres, it holds it exceptionally low with KTM's signature tank design that hangs down at either side. The result is a very stable feeling bike, especially at low speeds, and also it reduces the sloshing around of fuel when the bike is changing direction. Again, the chassis design and the fuel tank design are pretty much the same, and that's a big positive in my book. But one of the things that never did quite sit right with me was the styling, and I know that sounds highly superficial, but the reality is that the way a bike looks can be a massive factor for a lot of customers. And the previous Gen 890 Adventure, partly because of that fuel tank design, looked kind of bottom heavy, as opposed to the more muscular, broad-shouldered stylings of most other adventure bikes. Plus, the headlight just seemed to sit too proud and not really join up with the rest of the bike. But fortunately for 2023, they made some changes at the front here, adding some bulk to the fairing and windscreen, which make the whole thing look infinitely better to me. I mean, no doubt there's an improvement in wind protection because that windscreen is quite a bit wider, and so if you're touring or covering distance, that's always going to be a good thing, but purely from a poser perspective, it's done wonders for the front end, and that's despite the rest of the bike staying roughly the same. So it's interesting to see that just a small tweak to bridge that gap to the headlight can massively improve the aesthetics. On top of that, they've also beefed up the construction of the front fairing so that it can better support a GPS unit. As for the chassis, we've got updated suspension, still courtesy of their in-house brand, WP. And while the suspension on the previous gen was perfectly good, the 43mm upside-down fork now gets compression and rebound adjustment, which will allow you to dial in the ride to your exact preference and riding scenario. Plus, they've got those little thumb adjusters on the top caps, which is almost always the case with WP, and it makes adjustments super convenient because you don't need any tools. In fact, you can pretty much make changes while you're on the go. Now, the rebound and preload adjustable rear shock also comes from WP, and they say it has new settings which are better suited to adventure riding. Not exactly sure what they mean by that, but perhaps they've firmed it up a little. Now, tyres are also a little bit more off-road focused for 2023, and as such should offer a little more grip on loose surfaces. You see, the previous gen was shod with Avon trail riders, which, as you can see from these images, are not exactly hardcore knobblies. In fact, Avon themselves described them as 90% for on-road usage, 10% off. But the new 890 Adventure now ships with Pirelli's Scorpion Rally STRs, which clearly have a more aggressive tread pattern. I mean, make no mistake, they're still majority road biased, and in any seriously muddy conditions you'll quickly find their limits, but they do handle surprisingly well on the road, and yet should just offer a little more capability than the Avons for easy green lanes and gravel roads. Personally, I think they're a great choice of adventure tyre. Now onto the electronics package, which also gets an update, firstly with a refresh to the 5-inch TFT display. Physically, it gets new hardware, so it gets a bonded mineral glass screen, and they say that gives it more scratch and glare resistance. But also, the software itself gets an update with a complete overhaul of the menus and graphics. Perhaps the most important if you're doing any level of distance or touring is their new Turn-by-Turn Plus navigation system, which adds a load more functionality, including more control directly from the TFT display, which means you don't need to stop and fish out your phone if you want to change routes. As for the riding modes and rider aids, well, you've still got the street, off-road, rain and optional rally settings, but the cornering ABS specifically has been upgraded with a new improved unit. And they also say that it's better integrated with those riding modes. So the off-road ABS setting is now automatically enabled in the off-road and rally modes, which switches off the ABS at the rear and lessens the intervention at the front, allowing for more slip and slide. Now, some of the features like the rally mode, cruise control, quick shifter and MSR are priced as optional extras. And perhaps controversially, KTM's new demo mode, which was announced with the 890 Adventure R, also makes an appearance here. And it basically means that you can try out some of those optional features for free for the first 1,500 kilometers, and then after that you have to decide whether to pay or not. On the one hand, if you're genuinely undecided about some of these upgrades, then it's possibly a nice way to try them out. But on the other, I can imagine a lot of riders finding it a bit cheeky to have all this stuff installed on the bike and then switching it off and forcing you to pay just when you've got used to having it. Either way, I'd love to know what you think of it down in the comments. Other than that, we've got some new aluminium tank protectors, slightly beefed up bodywork on the side to protect the seat and tank, a bit of a tweak to the seat and ergonomics, and then some new graphics with either a predominantly black paint job or the classic KTM orange and white. Bikes will apparently hit dealers in December 2022, so pretty much right away, and there's no price as of yet, but I'd expect it in the 11 to 12 grand range. Personally, I can't wait to try out some of these new upgrades when I manage to get hold of one for review. But as always, I'd love to know what you think of it down in the comments below, and if you haven't seen that 890 Adventure review I shot last year already, I've linked to it on the screen now so you can give it a click and give it a watch.